Hello, everyone. So, today we're talking about the case of Matthew Margolies. This case is disturbing and very sad. It is that of a child, so I'm just letting you know in case the cases of children is just something that's very hard to listen to. This one it's very hard to listen to. It's going to make you very sad, so I'm just going to let you know right now. You might want to skip this one if children cases are usually hard for you to listen to. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get into this. All the links I used to research will be down below, like always. There will also be a link to a case suggestions form, and there will also be a link to my other podcast, Sinister, in case you would like to check that out. But yeah, so let's talk about Matthew. So, this case is a case that shook the community of Greenwich, Connecticut for decades. Greenwich is a place that was once described as being filled with old money and one of the safest places to live. But not all of Greenwich overflows with wealth, as there is a small working class neighborhood known as Pemberwick, which is called the Valley. And this is where Matthew Margolies was from. He was 13 years old, and Matthew, he felt at home on the Byram River. He was an eighth grader, and he would spend a lot of time fishing out there. It was a hobby started just by doing it with his granddad. The river was familiar to Matthew, and on August 31st, 1984, Matthew would make a trip to the Byron River alone, as he had lost his granddad only 2 weeks prior. So this was something that was very special to him, and he decided he was going to continue doing their little tradition of going out there and fishing together. After some fishing, he made his way to his grandma's house on Morgan Avenue around midday. He unloaded his catch into the sink and discarded his wet clothes on some of the furniture. He changed into dry clothes, grabbed his spinning rod, and left to go into town, but he never came back home. The last sightings of him can be narrowed down to the area of downtown Pemberwick. Many witnesses place him within a block of the Sparta Deli around 5 p.m. The deli was a popular hangout for the Valley Boys, which are a group of older teens known to bully other kids, and they're also known to cause trouble. The last person to see him alive was a young woman who lived on Nicholas Street. She saw him walking down Comley Avenue with his fishing pole and waved to him from her vehicle around 5:30 p.m. When his mother, Mary Ann, got off work from her shift at the hospital, she headed to her mother's house where she was to pick Matthew up. Her mother had taken her older daughter, Stacy, to an appointment, and Mary Ann thought maybe Matthew went with them. When they came home without him, she knew something was wrong. So if you're confused with what I just said, his grandma took Stacy to the appointment, not Mary Ann. I know the way I worded it probably sounded a little bit weird. But they knew something was wrong when, they came back without him. Mary Ann made calls to his friends, but none of them knew where he went. Some reported him missing, or she reported him missing at 7 p.m. that evening. Police would make a series of just absolute blunders from the beginning. They told the family that he was probably just hiding in the woods. This 13-year-old boy is just hiding in the woods. But then there would come days of torrential rain, and he never came home. And even after, these days of torrential rain and him never coming home, that's when they learned about the parents' divorce, and they insisted he must have just run away to Texas to be with his dad. Well, his relationship with his dad was very strained, and he did not take any clothes and did not have any money to get himself to Texas. So, it's kind of weird that this was even a theory by police. It wouldn't be till much later that police would admit foul play was immediately suspected, and his case did not get a detective until many days later. Finally, state police assembled, and they began to search around Byram River with canine units. The river was dragged, a small pond located nearby was searched by scuba divers, and flyers were posted. Helicopters flew around to do an aerial search, and even the family searched for their son. Marianne recalled a conversation she had with him days before. He had inquired about a wooded area just above Pemberwick Road. Marianne said not to go alone due to the terrain and the remoteness. Marianne and her boyfriend made a trip there, and when they arrived, there was an overwhelming scent of decay in the air. Several residents and employees working on the power lines on the road below had alerted police in recent days of the smell, but the police disregarded the notion that it was Matthew's body, and instead they insisted that it was probably just fish that had been gutted along the river, as it was a popular place for anglers to clean their catches. But on September 5th, a volunteer fireman would make his trip up there. And this volunteer fireman, he was Fred Lambert. He had just returned home from a trip when he learned about Matthew and that he was missing, and he was absolutely shocked that the police hadn't searched the area. Fred would come across a single shoe, so he marked the area and he called police. Quickly, the police did show up, and he led them to the area. Just after 4 p.m., unfortunately, Fred and 2 police officers would come across the body of Matthew. A call was made to the medical examiner, and the medical examiner was expecting a drowning incident for some reason, but the scene was very brutal and far more grisly than he expected. There was a swarm of flies, and underneath a bed of heavy rocks and leaves, that is where Matthew's body was. Matthew was found wearing only underwear and one sock. His t-shirt had been twisted up and knitted around his neck. His chest and abdomen showed multiple stab wounds and lacerations on his neck. There was a 10-inch boning knife that was found nearby. Further examination was even more horrifying. So, Matthew's missing sock was stuffed into his throat, and behind that was dirt, debris, and a 5-inch stick. The presence of dirt in his trachea and one of his lungs revealed that he had been alive for much of this torture. The cause of death was both traumatic asphyxiation and multiple stab wounds. Following the discovery of the body, police stopped 512 motorists to see if they saw anything, but their delay in how they worked the case, that is what worked against them. The boning knife was sent to the state crime lab along with other evidence, but much was rendered useless because it was contaminated. Like, he had been missing for days at this point, and then there was that torrential rain. A lot of it was probably washed away. So police had also, and this is another thing that really contaminated the evidence that they did have, is that police had used a truck from their animal control division to transport the evidence. Not something clean, they just put it in there with animal control. A month later, the FBI profiler John Douglas was brought in to assist to ID what characteristics the killer possessed. John concluded that the killer was a classic loser with low self-esteem, likely unkempt, overweight, may have a drug or alcohol dependency problem. The crime exhibited sexual overtones, although Matt had not been sexually assaulted. He had not been. John described the killer as a typical psychotic sexual sadist that igniting pain fueled his fantasies. Also, the killer was likely local due to where where Matthew had been found. Police would come across people of interest, one being a 32-year-old maintenance worker with a previous arrest record for sexual assault. There was also a 20-something known in the area who was a pedophile that was also considered. Both men were investigated and no arrests were made. The pool of suspects expanded to some youths, but names were redacted because they were minors at the time. One was a 17-year-old who was reported as, quote, sick and twisted. A warrant a warrant was served to search his home, but nothing was found. A boy from Port Chester was looked into who had a criminal record. The most compelling suspect was uh, was the friend to the Port Chester team. So this friend was a 16-year-old bully who lived on Greenaway Drive, which was a short distance from the crime scene, and had a predisposition for violence. He had pulled a knife on some of Matthew's friends in the past. A few months before his murder, um, he had lured another boy into a vacant home and attacked him ruthlessly. Um, and I'm not going to go into the details of what exactly he did to this boy, but the boy did live. The 16-year-old bully was interviewed for hours, and he provided an alibi. His home was searched, and police followed up with his manager, who provided his time card. He punched in at 4:03 p.m. and was out at 10:45 p.m., but months later, police would find out that that time card had been altered. Also, on the day that Matt was killed, the 16-year-old bully did not, conveniently, punch out for lunch. Suspicion still follows that boy to this day. Matthew's murder was over 40 years ago, and it's still not solved. Marianne still lives in the same home, and she's still hoping for justice. A memorial can be found on Byram River Bridge. There is a plaque there that has the image of a fish with a fishing pole, and it says, quote, "An excellent angler, and now with God, Matthew Margolies, 1971 to 1984." End quote. Anyone who has any information about this case or his last moments, anything that could be of assistance, you are urged to contact the Connecticut Cold Case Hotline at 866-623-8058. And that is all I have for you on the case of Matthew Margolies. Like I said, this was a very sick case, a very disturbing case. Um, this is just a little 13-year-old boy who wanted to spend the day fishing, something he did with his grandfather, and probably thought that, Greenwich being described as one of the safest places to live, probably didn't think that something would happen to him. Honestly, I don't know who I think could have done it, because there's a lot of very, I feel like, viable options. The pedophile in the area, I know that they were like kind of, I don't want to say cleared, but they were never arrested. They were never really looked into after, they had been interviewed. The bullies, which they have a history of attacking other people and pulling out knives. I feel like they're all very viable suspects, so I don't even know what I believe, but I agree that it's probably someone local to know where this area is, how to get there. I kind of feel like maybe in a way, if it was the bully, maybe they somehow managed to lure Matthew up there. Because if this terrain is really like bad and remote, I don't know if he would just necessarily go up there. I don't think he would just disregard what his mother told him about, don't go up there. So I feel like maybe he was lured up there somehow and something was done to him and he was attacked. That's kind of what I lean towards, but not 100%. That being said, I am very hopeful that, this case can still be solved. It is so heartbreaking. When I saw a photo of the plaque, it just, it really broke my heart. His mother is still in that same house, the same area, still having to live this nightmare day after day, and I just hope that somehow, some way, this case can be solved. Like I said, anybody with any information is urged to contact that phone number I just read off to you. Please let me know what you think about this case down below. What do you think happened? Please be respectful. And I will see you guys very soon. Bye, guys.